Okay. If you recall, we're not using them quite yet. We will use them today. I just wanted you to have them ready. If you recall, we were starting to talk about what social psychology is. And it sounded like a great many of you already have a pretty good sense of social psychology. You've been introduced to it in other classes, maybe in other disciplines. Even sociology teaches courses that have social psychology in them. You take an intro psych, and they cover various really key findings and ideas about social psychology. What I want to do right now here at the outset is sort of lay out some overarching principles or themes for you guys, things that we're going to come back to on, over and over again throughout the semester. And I hope by laying these out in the beginning, this will help us sort of see connections among different topics as we go from chapter to chapter. And I also want to lay out some motivational principles. There's a lot of motives, a lot of desires that drive our behavior, right? I mean, we do things for certain reasons because we want certain things or we want to avoid certain things. And there are certain motivations that are driving ostensibly really different kinds of behaviors. But again, if you understand the motivation driving these different behaviors, you can make connections between different kinds of theories and different kinds of behaviors. So I'd like to do this in the beginning of the semester. So in terms of overarching themes, there are two of them, and they are really just defining what social psychology is. Okay? The first theme I mentioned a little bit in our first lecture last week, and that's the idea that people, us, me and you, all of us, we construct our own reality. Social psychology is not about objective reality. It's about reality in the eye of the perceiver. And we have a special term to refer to this idea, which was present from the very beginning of social psychology and psychology as a whole. You're going to read about it in chapter 1 if you haven't already. We have this term that we use, which is construals. You've heard the term before. We mean it as your subjective interpretation of reality, your construals of what this class is. For those of you who are a psych major, this class means something to you. Your construal of this class is very different from somebody who's just taking this for fun, who isn't a psychology major, who has no intention of ever taking a psychology course again. Really different construals, understandings, perceptions of what this class is. Okay, so construals are interpretations, the meaning we impart to stimuli out there in the world. Okay, so to give you an example, I gave you the example of the class. Let's give a more social example. If you're an interviewer and you're interviewing a variety of candidates, your evaluations, your impressions of these candidates are your construals. Are these people qualified or not as candidates? These are construals you have, the interpretations that you have of this person's gestures, the things they say, how they're dressed, how they carry themselves. These are the interpretations, the meanings that you give to the candidate's behaviors. Now, it's important to know what somebody's construals are, because you can't understand somebody's behaviors without having some sense of how they're interpreting the situation, right? When we act in a certain way, we are acting in response to a situation, and that situation is something that we're construing. Yeah. Yeah, so there are many different ways. There are ways to get around that issue, asking sensitive kinds of questions, things that people wouldn't want to admit. We can use what's known as implicit measures or indirect measures, measures that look like they're measuring one thing but are actually measuring something else. And we're going to have many examples of that as we make our way through the semester. But there could be some meaning, something interesting about how people see themselves, even if it is biased. In fact, social psychologists are really interested in people's biases, particularly when it comes to how they see themselves and things connected to them. But we have many clever ways, and I think that's one of the things you're going to discover this semester, is the many different clever ways that we as social psychologists and psychologists in general can get at, can try to capture things that seem really difficult to capture. Okay, so construals are the first step. If I don't know how you're interpreting the situation, it's going to be really difficult for me to know how you're going to respond in that situation. Okay, so you got to know how somebody's construing a situation to be able to predict how they're going to behave in that situation. Now, some of you out there might be thinking, wow, okay, someone's construals of the situation. How hard is that? This is a lecture hall. That's my construal of the situation, and probably 100% of us would make that interpretation. We all have the same construals. Why is this interesting at all? Okay, can I borrow this a second? This is a pencil. How many of you think this is a pencil? Is that your construal? That's frightening. Okay, raise your hands because you're scaring me. Okay, 100% of people should say that this is a pencil. Okay, that's not, doesn't make this concept of construal sound very interesting, since it seems like, well, what's the big deal? We all have these construals. But the things that we're interested in this class as social psychologists is your construals of what I would argue is some of the most ambiguous stimuli out there. It's easy to not argue that that is a red pencil, but what about arguing that somebody is a sincere person, that Bill Clinton was a great president, okay, that he's sincere, okay, or that this candidate seems really confident, okay, social stimuli, or that this party is really fun, or that that person is having a good time at this party. Those kinds of construals, those kinds of perceptions, that's what we care about in this class. We care about social situations, social targets like people, like ourselves. And I argue those are among the most ambiguous stimuli out there, and that's why it matters that you think about what it is that people are construing, what kind of meaning they're taking from this party situation, from this candidate who's acting this particular way. Okay? So construals are really, really important to understand. I'm going to give you one final example if you're not getting this basic point yet. Sometimes you're walking along wherever you are on the streets in Oakland, in Berkeley, across campus, what have you. You might hear some raised voices. Let's say you hear two men shouting at each other, or you see a woman and a man struggling with one another, yelling, their voices kind of raised. This is a socially ambiguous situation. Is this all in good fun? Are they drunk? What's happening here? Or is this like a potentially more serious situation here that requires you dial 911? Okay? How you construe that situation? Oh, it's just a lover's spat. They're just having fun, joking with each other. Oh, those guys are just kidding around. You're going to keep on walking by. Construal A leads to behavior A. But if you see this as an alarming situation, they are not kidding around. Okay? Construal B is going to lead to a different kind of behavior. Okay? Construals are the first step, and we care so much about them. And that is an assumption we're making in social psychology, that you've got to understand people's construals to be able to understand their situation. You're going to see in social psychology experiments what we do is try to manipulate people's construals and see what that then does to their behavior. Okay? Okay. Second, really basic idea of social psychology. Yes. When I say manipulate, I mean, as a researcher, I'm going to go in and change the situation around to try to control your construal, push it in a certain direction that I'm interested in knowing people's reaction to. If you are threatened, I will give you false feedback and a test to make you threatened. You perceive threat, how are you going to respond to that? I will manipulate a threat construal. That's what I mean. We're going to get more into that when we talk about research methods. Social influence, that is what social psychology is about. So on the one hand, that doesn't seem like a very interesting theme that I'm laying out here, okay? But the real point I want to make here is that social influence, even though we live in this Western culture and we like to believe that we're not influenced by others, conformity is a bad word in our culture, but social influence is pervasive, okay? And it's often invisible. Okay, it's often visible. A teenager at a party, people pressuring him to drink. Come on, you boys, have another drink. Okay, visible social influence. Your parents calling you up. What grade did you get on your test? Are you going to be a doctor? Did you take your MCAT yet? These are visible forms of social influence. But social influence, okay, is just as powerful, if not more powerful, in its invisible forms. Okay, and I'll give you a couple examples. One are, personal distance norms. Okay, these are norms that we have picked up through our social interactions. I'm pretty sure your parents never said to you, don't stand too close to somebody else when you talk to them because I think you're weird. Okay, this is not something that you were explicitly taught. It's something you picked up as being socially appropriate. Every time you walk near someone, I'm talking to him, I will maintain, presumably, a normal social distance. I don't have to sit there and go, oopsie, I better keep my 2.5 feet distance here. It's just something I'm used to doing. This is part of the social contract. This is an invisible social influence that I adhere to because I don't want to be seen as a weirdo. Okay? I don't want negative social consequences. Okay? Another example of an invisible social influence is, let's say you're watching a political debate, or let's say you're watching Fox News or some really dramatic sort of political discussion. Your evaluations, okay, of that commentary, let's say, is probably going to be biased, okay, in a direction that is consistent with your political leanings. So you, as a Democrat watching Fox News, you might be appalled at the idiocy of the person speaking, whereas somebody who's more conservatively inclined might see it as, the sharpest person on the planet talking on Fox News, okay? But you're not sitting there thinking, oh, I'm biased and being influenced by the fact that I identify and feel a member of the group Democrats versus the member of the group conservatives. How many of you went to the football game this weekend? Okay, who won? Wow, that's a miracle. Okay, so Cal won. Okay, but when you're watching games, okay, games when you have a stake in it, invisible, like you probably wanted Cal to win, and you're looking at these calls. I know nothing about football, so if I'm using the wrong language, sorry. Let's say there's a referee or something making a call on a play, and you're like, that is totally unfair, okay, because it's against Cal. And lo and behold, those people across the stadium who was it Sacramento or something, right? They're like, oh yeah, good call, good play, okay? You have different construals of the exact same event because presumably you have your identities bound up in very different social groups, okay? Either Sacramento or Cal. Invisible social influence. This is not something you're necessarily aware of, and it's something you might even argue is affecting you. No, I'm sure it was a bad call, okay? You actually deny any influence of your Cal affiliation on how you construe things, okay? Many, 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 many examples of pervasive and invisible social influence, and this is what the meat of this course is all about, okay? Motivational principles. Why do we do what we do? What is driving all our behaviors? Okay? Different social psychology textbooks are going to use different labels for these key motivations driving our behavior. These are the labels that are fairly consistent with your textbook and ones that I prefer. The need, this is one of my favorite ones because I'm so high in the need for this. We really like to feel like we get what's going on. Okay? We want to understand why things happen. We want things to make sense. And the reason that's the case is because if you feel like you understand why your romantic partner gets moody at nighttime, okay, or why your best friend criticized you, okay, or praised you, you have the feeling that you can predict and control your future in some way. Okay, if I know that this bugs my romantic partner, this is something, a pet peeve of his, I'm going to change my behavior to avoid that kind of reaction in the future. This gives me the sense that I can control what's going to happen in my relationship. Okay, when you understand things or feel you have an understanding of things, it gives you the sense that you can control the world. And most of us have a decent level of need for control, a need to feel like we can predict and control our outcomes. Okay, when bad things happen, okay, when somebody gets diagnosed with a terminal illness, it's shocking. One of the reasons why it's so upsetting, besides concern about your loved one, is that it undermines your feeling that you have control over things. Because something completely unexpected, completely inexplicable is happening, and we don't like that because it undermines our sense that we can have some control over our lives and our outcomes. Okay? And the need for accuracy is a need that I would subsume under this need for understanding and control. The need to sometimes get at the truth. If you're buying a car, if you're choosing which college to go to, you want to get at the truth. You want to look at the financial aid packages. You want to look at the car details and stuff, whatever car things that people care about when they're trying to decide what is a good car to buy. You're trying to get at truthful information. And part of that is you want to make the right decision. Okay? You want to make the right decision and feel like you have a sense of control over your future. That this is the right school for me. Based on these objective facts, this is the right school for me. I will do well here at Cal. Okay? So the need for accuracy can be thought of as part of this need we have for understanding and control. Okay? This is the most difficult one to grasp. The other two are much easier. We like to feel good about ourselves and things connected to us. It turns out everybody thinks that they're better than average. Think about that. It's not possible. We can't all be better than average. Okay? Even drivers, after getting in an accident, report being better than average drivers. Okay? We have a very strong need, especially in this culture, to think highly of ourselves. This reflects this need to feel good about me and mine. Your biased perceptions of the Cal football team, the Cal football game, is in part potentially your need to feel good about your Cal affiliation. Probably should seek that need in a domain other than football. Okay? But that reflects this need you have to feel good about not only yourself, but the things that you're connected to, such as Cal. Yeah. Right, and you're going to read about that, particularly in culture, here in the United States. Okay, we have this real need for self-esteem. It's a very easy finding to get in the laboratory, but it's less strong in other cultures, or one could argue it takes different forms in other cultures. Okay, it's a somewhat nuanced debate, but yeah, in general, some people would argue that this need for self-esteem, need for feeling good about yourself, is less strong in other cultures, such as more collectivistic East Asian cultures. A theme we will come back to again and again as well. Okay, last one I want you to be aware of, general motivational theme, is our need for being connected to other people, to belong to social groups. We are social creatures. We have a fundamental, evolutionarily based need to belong with other people. We're going to see this when we talk about attraction, what attracts us to other people, what drives us to want to form bonds and affiliate with other people. We're going to see it when we talk about how we engage in various strategies to give off a favorable impression of ourselves, in part because we're trying to garner social acceptance and avoid social rejection. We're going to see it when we talk about theories that are focused on our identities as members of different social groups, whether it's your family group, your gender group, your sexual orientation group, your religious group, what have you. That reflects this need you have to belong to something bigger than yourself. Okay? Last question for the next 6 minutes, and you cannot ask a question. Go. It is not intended to be a hierarchy at all. Not at all. Okay? Okay. Keep these principles in mind, and I'm going to refer back to them as we make our way through the semester. If you see connections, raise your hand. Hey, isn't this like an example of, of this invisible social influence that's always happening? Try to keep that in mind. It will really help you to see connections between different kinds of findings that we come across. Okay, let us turn to one of my favorite topics, maybe not yours, but hopefully you'll feel differently about that after today's lecture, which is research methods in social psychology. I want to get first an initial sense of where you guys are at. So let's try this and not be spastic about it. Hold on one second. I want to know your research methods background. Choose one of these on your handy dandy little clicker. Do you have very little background? None to very little? Have you taken Psych 101 and certainly listened to the research methods lecture and other decade courses? Do you feel a little bit more equipped than the average decade course person? And finally, do you feel like you could be up here teaching it? So let's start the clicking now. I'm going to give you 10 seconds. I want to get a sense of where you guys are at. This is fun. Getting there. We're getting there. Come on. Do I see 275? Come on. That's it? We're topping out at 235? All right. Let's see where you guys are at. Oh, okay. We got one person. Who's that one person? Get up here right now. Okay, we're kind of in the middle, right? Okay, some exposures. This is so good for me to know, so I'm not going to feel like I'm talking to people who are rolling their eyes at me. That it's worth going over research methods, and that is, in fact, what we're going to do. Okay, terrific. Good to know. Okay, let's talk about formulating hypotheses in social psychology. I know you think you know about this, but it's worth going over again, as we've just seen. Then we'll talk about two basic research designs, the most commonly used research designs, correlational and experimental research design. Okay, well, what is a hypothesis? Well, okay, a hypothesis in any science, okay, in any field, but also in ours, to give the simplest case, we're talking about stating some sort of prediction about a relationship between two or more variables. The simplest case would be two variables, that such and such are related to one another in a particular way. So a non-social psychology example would be the very novel and interesting hypothesis that your height and weight are related to one another. More interesting, more social psychological would be the example that I hypothesize that social support, maybe increases stress or decreases stress, is related to stress. I hypothesize that the nature of one's relationship with their parents has an impact on how they relate to future romantic partners. That's a hypothesis between early experiences in parental relationships being linked to later experiences in romantic relationships. I might have the hypothesis that self-esteem and how well you do in school are related to one another, two variables stating a prediction between them. And social psychologists have the hypothesis that members of different groups having contact with one another has an impact on prejudice, that intergroup contact and prejudice are related to one another. All examples of hypotheses that we might make in psychology or otherwise. Whoa. Okay. How do we go about testing hypotheses like that? That you think self-esteem, let's say self-esteem, the more self-esteem you have, that breeds academic success. Or that media exposure to violence, okay? This is a big deal for parents out there. I have two little kids, and I'm very aware of the enormous amounts of violence that my kids see on television. Is it related to higher likelihood of aggressive behaviors? How do I go and test that hypothesis? How do psychologists go about and test it? Let's talk correlational research designs first. Okay, correlation. You've heard this term before. What does it refer to? It refers to the strength of the relationship between your two variables of interest. And when you're doing a correlational research study or using a correlational research design, you need your variables to vary in quantity or amount. Level of self-esteem can vary in quantity and amount. Academic success can vary from A, B, C, D, E. Amount of aggression can vary high to low levels of aggression. Amount of exposure to media violence, 1 hour a week, 2 hours a week, 12 hours a week, what have you. Your variables are varying in quantity or amount, and you're looking at how strongly those two variables are related to one another and in what direction they're related to one another. So how many of you have heard of correlation coefficients before in Psych 101? This is the statistic that researchers compute to get that measure of the strength and direction of the relationship between your two variables. And it's this statistic that varies in size from -1 to +1. So far, so good. It can vary from +1 to -1. But really, what you need to know is, what do you make of the numbers? How do you interpret them? Okay, again, I know many of you have covered this before, but it's worth going over again. So we have a correlation of positive 0.34. What does that mean? What does the positive mean, and what does the 0.34 mean? Somebody, let's say we're talking about self-esteem and academic success. What does that 0.34 mean? Somebody other than green shirt guy. Yeah, you. Okay, so meaning higher self-esteem is associated with. Okay, so she's saying it's a moderate relationship, okay, because the size is 0.34, it's not 0.02, it's not 0.99, okay, it's 0.34, that's correct. There's some degree of relationship there, and she said that the slope goes upward. She's picturing the slope, okay? In this graph, on one axis you have amount of self-esteem, and the other axis you have grades. Okay, it's going upward, meaning what? Higher self-esteem is associated with higher academic success. Okay, that's right. That is what a positive correlation means. Increase in contact with members of another group associated with increase in prejudice. Increase in self-esteem is associated with an increase in academic success. A negative correlation then means what? Say that out loud. That's right. One goes up, the other goes down. Okay. An increase in contact is associated with a decrease in prejudice, which is what the hypothesis actually is. Okay. An increase in self-esteem is actually associated with a decrease in academic success. An increase in media violence exposure is associated with a decrease in depression. Okay. What does a correlation of 0 mean? No correlation. What does that mean, though? They're independent. They're not related to one another. Okay. What self-esteem level you are has no bearing on your academic success. Okay. Your exposure to media violence has no bearing on whether you engage in aggressive behavior or not. And as she was suggesting over there, that we've covered the direction, the positive negative sign, and then the size of the correlation indicates how strong the correlation is, how much those things predict one another. Okay? Bigger numbers, 0.67 is a stronger, tighter relationship than 0.34. Negative 0.67 is a stronger, tighter, negative relationship than negative 0.34. You with me? Okay. Let's say that I find that chewing gum in class is strongly related to getting lower exam scores. Which of the following correlation coefficients best captures this finding? Start your clicking now. And spit out your gum. Okay, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And the correct answer is hopefully the one that has the highest bar. Yay! Okay, negative 0.56. You got it. One goes up, chewing gum more is associated with lower academic success.